Aline's rules was simple first, morality later. Boar was already calculating escape routes beside her. How far to the hidden passage behind the tower? How many seconds to grab her and jump? The cultists crawled toward Jiri and prostrated themselves on the scorching stones, skin burning, not caring. The lead cultist trembled with ecstasy. They hailed him as Great Giri Bastamor, Flame of the Abyss. The cultists cried, "Your slaves paved your path with their souls and blood." They chanted, "Praise you, praise the Abyss." Giri looked down at them, the way a butcher looks at meat on a cutting board. He bent down, pinched the lead cultist around the waist with 2 fingers and lifted him into the air. The cultist's face went from fanatic to overjoyed. He was being raised toward his god. He thought he was being blessed. Giri opened his mouth and bit him in half. The top half went down. The bottom half dropped to the cracked stones with a wet thud. Blood splashed across the other prostrate cultists. The entire street went silent. Then the first person vomited, a young soldier on the mansion wall. His spear clattered to the ground and he doubled over the battlements. Nobody laughed. Half the elite guards were sheet white, hands shaking, some stepping backward involuntarily. They were trained soldiers, but nobody had trained them for a demon eating people like snacks. Vivian sat on her horse, face drained of color, forcing her stomach to stay put through sheer willpower. Behind her, everyone except the hardest veterans was throwing up. Lane was one of the exceptions. He looked at Vivian, waiting for orders. But for the first time since she'd returned to the barony, he saw her hesitate. She'd given every order cleanly until now, but her master was 1,000 miles away asleep. Her forces 800 cavalry, 3,000 infantry. A dozen level 8 and 9 knights suddenly seemed very small in front of this thing. Jerry finished swallowing, looked down at the remaining cultists still face down on the burning stones, and made a satisfied sound. "You summoned me." "Good." He bent down again, reaching for another one. "Now offer me more of your flesh." Jerry ate the cultists one by every single one wore an expression of ecstasy as they were lifted to his mouth. They believed being devoured was merging with their god. When he finished the last one, magma-like pulsed through his chest, and he breathed out a wave of heat that scorched the stones black. He'd absorbed everything the cultists told him through their blood. Mother against daughter, he found it amusing. Humans say demons love killing each other, but you nobles aren't much different. No matter, this battlefield belongs to me now. He stomped one foot. A visible shockwave of heat exploded outward in every direction. Cobblestones flipped up, spewing dark flames. Wooden window frames ignited instantly. Plaster walls cracked and peeled. One stomp turned an entire city block into inferno. Vivian ordered a full retreat. No hesitation from the soldiers. They just watched a single footstep create a sea of fire. They pulled back toward the city gates, carrying wounded, dragging burned comrades. But the dozen level 8 and 9 knights stayed behind, channeling battle energy into their weapons, slicing apart tongues of flame that chased the retreating troops. Up on the tower, Boar had finally had enough. He grabbed Eileen and threw her over his shoulder. She was shrieking, half mad. "Did you see? I summoned him. I won. I won." Her voice was shattered. Nothing like the composed noblewoman she pretended to be. Boar didn't argue. He kicked open a hidden door and ran down the escape tunnel. He didn't care who won the war. He only wanted her alive. Giri walked toward the knights. Each stride covered 2 body lengths. Every footprint melting stone into lava. He slapped a burning wall apart casually and sent the rubble flying at the knights. One level 8 knight blocked with his shield. The impact launched him into the opposite wall. Shield bent into an unnatural curve. Coughed blood but stood back up, battle energy still burning. The knights formed a human wall across the burning street, connecting their battle energy into a barrier, blocking wave after wave of fire to buy time for the soldiers behind them. Giri looked at them the way you look at ants. He raised his right claw and pushed the air casually. A shockwave ripped down the center of the street, carving a black trench through the cobblestones. Knights caught in its path were flung like dolls. Some punched through burning walls. Some tumbled through the air before crashing down, their energy shields shattered. Then Boar appeared at the far end of the street, blocking the road to Vivian. He'd changed his mind about running. Even if he got Eileen away, she'd never survive what came after. Better to fight here, earn Vivian's mercy for Eileen with his life. He dropped to one knee toward Vivian's direction. "Please, Lady Vivian. She is your mother in name. Spare her life. In return, I offer everything I have." Without waiting for an answer, he turned, then drew his sword, and charged Giri. Level 11 elite knight battle energy wrapped him in pale gold light. The worn rose on his sword hilt seemed to bloom one last time. Vivian watched his back without expression. Knight brought the captured Eileen before her, still babbling, half insane. Vivian didn't look at her stepmother. "Lock her up. After the battle, I will judge her personally." She hadn't accepted Boar's plea, but she understood the politics. The stepmother had to be judged by the legitimate heir, not killed by a demon. That's not mercy. That's procedure. And if Boar's sacrifice proved useful, maybe she'd let Eileen live. Death sentence avoided, but a lifetime of punishment guaranteed. All knights listen. Vivian drew her sword and pointed it at Jiri. This is our land. I don't care if he's a fire demon or anything else. He doesn't get to do this here. Everyone who can still move, follow me. The surviving knights crawled from rubble and fire. Over a dozen level 8 and 9 warriors plus level 11 Boar charged a level 16 master rank fire demon head on. Jiri didn't even bother raising his claws. He let them reach him, let their swords scrape shallow marks on his lava shell skin, then backhanded them away one at a time. Each knight flew through the air and crashed into ruins. Boar flanked him and drove his sword into a crack in the demon's side armor. Jiri looked down at the little blade stuck between his ribs, then looked at Boar. You're slightly more interesting than the others. Then he punched Boar in the chest. The knight flew 15, bounced, rolled, and stopped. His armor had a fist-shaped dent. His energy shield was gone. He was conscious but couldn't stand. His fingers still gripped his sword. The rose on the handle now stained red with blood. Jiri plucked the sword from his side, pinched it between two fingers and snapped it like a dry twig. And then he turned toward the shadows at the end of the street. Interesting yet boring humans. He raised his voice. Old man, how much longer are you going to sit there watching? Silence, then a soft sigh. So you noticed me after all. The figure stepped from the shadows. A gray-haired old man in plain gray clothes. A simple sword at his hip. Deep wrinkles but a perfectly straight back. His eyes crossed the burning street and settled on Jiri with absolute calm. This was Whittle, level 17 human swordsman, Vivian's great-great-grandfather, the Sun family's hidden guardian. Jiri's eyes lit up finally, prey worth taking seriously. Whittle, Vivian's great-great-grandfather, a level 17 swordsman, and the Sun family's hidden guardian, stepped out of the shadows. Gray hair, plain clothes, a simple sword worn smooth from decades of use. Didn't plan on coming out, he said to Jiri. Thought it was just a family power struggle. Didn't expect someone to summon something like you. He drew his sword. No metallic scrape, just a single pure ring. Then he vanished. Flash step. He crossed dozens of paces in an instant and appeared in front of Jiri. The sword wrapping battle energy and sword intent aimed straight at the demon's head. Jiri didn't dodge, he raised his arm. The blade hit and sank in half an inch. Whittle's full power, enough to kill almost anything at his level, stopped there. Jiri's arm didn't move. Burning blood dripped from the cut and sizzled holes in the stone below. Jiri looked at the sword embedded in his arm. Then he flicked it, and a shockwave of heat blasted Whittle away, sword and all. The old man flipped in the air and landed on his feet, cracking the cobblestones as he absorbed the force. That all you've got, old man? Jiri's wound sealed in seconds. I smell elf blood in you and in that girl over there, thin but much sweeter than ordinary humans. Whittle didn't respond. He gripped his sword again and flash-stepped to Jiri's flank, slashing upward from below. Jiri answered with his signature weapon, a fire whip woven from pure abyssal flame, extending from his palm in a blazing arc that forced Whittle back. The fire whip. Whittle had read about it in family records. Extension of the demon's body and will. One hit would kill him outright. Text said Jiri once whipped an elven legendary to death on a battlefield and savored the screams for centuries. Jiri charged. 4 men of demon moving impossibly fast fire whips sealing the escape route. Lava-wrapped fist aimed at Whittle's chest. Whittle raised his sword and formed a battle energy shield. Jiri's fist shattered it instantly and sent the old man flying through a burning wall. Rubble and sparks erupted. Whittle climbed out again, shaking. Gray hair covered in ash, but sword still in hand. Then Jiri turned toward Vivian. That girl, your great-great-granddaughter. The elf blood is faint, but she smells much better than regular humans. He lunged at her. Form of fire demon crossing dozens of street in second. Vivian was directing the last civilian evacuation. She turned and Jiri was already 10 steps away. She grabbed her staff, but there was no time for any spell. Lane threw himself in front of her without hesitation. Several other knights charged alongside him. Battle energy linked together, swords crossing to form a barrier. Jiri's fist hit the barrier like a hammer hitting glass. Energy shattered, knights went flying, blood spraying. Lane took the worst of it. The slammed into the wall behind Vivian. Blood pouring from his mouth. The sliding down to sit in the rubble. Alive, but barely. Those few seconds were enough. Whittle appeared in front of Vivian again. Twice knocked down, twice back up. Not easy for a man over 200 years old, but his sword was still in his hand and still burning gold. He glanced back at Vivian with the tone of an elder speaking to a promising grandchild. Vivian, fall back, leave this to me. He turned and poured every drop of his level 17 battle energy into one strike. Jiri tilted his head. You're more fun than those knights. But that's all you are. You're too weak. Not a level problem, a species problem. Your lives are too short, your body's too fragile. I've lived thousands of years in the abyss. I've fought the elf empress herself. A human who hasn't even lived 200 years. What can you possibly do against me? Whittle didn't answer. His grip said everything. They clashed. Every collision sent visible shockwaves rippling outward. Houses collapsed, streets became trenches. Clock tower caught fire and its giant bronze bell crashed into the square with a final deep toll. The entire district groaned under their battle. Citizens fled burning homes. Some were caught by stray shockwaves and simply vanished. No time to scream. People called out names in the ruins. Others dug through rubble for buried children. Vivian stood at the rear of the retreat and watched all of it. Her great-great-grandfather, the strongest person in her family, was being pushed back again and again. The gap between human and fire demon wasn't something 1 or 2 levels could bridge. She watched civilians die in the crossfire. She watched her future city burn. She watched her knights fall one after another into the wreckage. She commanded nearly 4,000 soldiers, had over a dozen high-level knights willing to die for her, but she herself was only level 3. She couldn't survive a single exchange with that demon. Then she the dragon blood, the bead I'd given her before she left. The drop of my heart blood sealed in a translucent shell, strung on a chain around her neck. She pulled it out. The bead glowed green in the firelight, radiating a vitality that drew every living eye. She gripped it tight. Her expression changed, the look of someone cornered, placing every last chip on a single card. The city burned behind Vivian as Geary and her great-great-grandfather tore the streets apart. Buildings collapsed, smoke turned the sky dark, civilians screamed in the ruins. Her city, the land her father left her, being destroyed right in front of her while she could do nothing. The level 3 mage apprentice who couldn't survive 1 second against that demon. She looked at the dragon blood bead in her palm, her last card. Geary kicked Whittle away again. The old swordsman blocked with his blade, but still flew backward, then turned and stared at the green bead in Vivian's hand. His eyes locked onto it. He was a fire demon who'd lived thousands of years in the abyss, seen every treasure there is. This blood was different. It carried a power opposite to the abyss's nature of destruction, something equally ancient. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that if he could swallow it and find its source, he could rise from a mere abyssal lord to contend for the rank of abyss king. He tried bargaining. Give me that blood, human girl. I'll swear a deep abyss oath to withdraw and never return to your territory. You keep your title, rebuild your sit, save your people. 1 bead of blood for all of that. Fair trade. He sounded sincere, more sincere than most human merchants. Vivian listened. Then she smiled. The kind of smile you make when you've heard something so absurd it's actually funny. Do you think I'm 3 years old, demon? What sane person would trust a demon's word? She paused. The deep abyss demon's credit rating in the human world. You couldn't borrow a single copper coin. Then she popped the bead into her mouth, bit through the shell and swallowed. My blood went down her throat, carrying something I'd never shown her. The power of abundance. The force I'd brought from another world. From another life independent of any god system in this world. His pupils blew wide, but he didn't panic. Thousands of years of survival taught him when to act. His plan was simple. Kill the old man fast, then catch the girl before the blood fully merged with her body. Interrogate her about the blood source. Swallow her whole blood, power and all. The demon's stomach can handle anything. He turned on Whittle with real killing intent now. No more playing. His fire whip swept in waves that sealed every escape angle. His lava-coated fist crashed into Whittle's sword. The blade screamed and cracked. Whittle flew again, legs carving trenches in the stone when he landed, and hands shaking. Battle energy more than half spent, breathing ragged. But his great-great-granddaughter was 50 steps behind him. He couldn't retreat. His old friends would laugh him into the grave, and he could feel it. Something strange and powerful was building inside Vivian. The swordsman's instinct told him that might be their only chance. The dragon blood hit Vivian's heart first. It pulsed outward through every vein, reforging her blood vessels as it went. Her heart clenched, then exploded with power she'd never felt. Her pupils flickered wildly between human round and dragon slit with each wave of agony. But she didn't grow wings. No skull appeared. Her transformation wasn't like my other vessels. The abundance power inside my blood intertwined with the dragon blood, restraining each other, forming a balance even I might not have predicted. She was walking a different path. She knelt on burning stones, body arched in pain, fingers clawing into the cracks, fingertips burning and bleeding. Her mind went blank except for one thought, buried since she was 13, ripped out when her father died, replanted when she was hunted through Sunset Forest. I will be fused to be weak. I will control my own fate. I will protect my people. I will keep my promise to him. Far away in Sunset Forest, deep inside my sealed vine palace, my eyes snapped open in the darkness. My body was still mid-transformation. My consciousness still submerged in deep sleep, but one thread had been plucked. The contract line tied to a 17-year-old girl's soul, transmitting an intense energy surge, dragon blood activation. But alongside it, something unexpected. not the usual vessel conversion. Instead, a power I knew intimately was rising in that distant city. In abundance, she'd awakened it. She'd found the path. I closed my eyes and sank back into the dark, because I knew, once someone steps onto that path, dying becomes very, very difficult. Nothing to worry about. As for whether she could threaten me with that power, please. I am the source of abundance in this world. Anyone who channels it draws from me and can never exceed my control. I wasn't worried about someone wielding it. I was worried nobody ever would. Now Vivian had proven it was possible. When I wake up, there will be new things to try. Hundreds of miles away in the middle of my deep sleep, I felt the contract thread vibrate for just an instant. I sent a brief pulse through it. It's something like, "I see you, go ahead." Then I pulled back and sank into the dark again. What I didn't tell her, and what she couldn't know, was how pleased I was. She'd awakened abundance. My power from my previous life, carried through my dragon blood into a 17-year-old human girl. The first person in this world besides me to walk that path. Vivian bit down through the pain and swallowed her screams. Every thought in her head was the same. Drive the demon out. Honor my trust. Honor the knights who threw themselves in front of her. Each one of those thoughts, each selfless, protecting impulse, fed the power rising inside her. That's how abundance works. It grows from the desire to give, to protect, to nurture. Not from selfishness, not from greed. From caring about others. That's why I chose her. Giri had Whittle by the head, dangling him in the air, about to crush his skull. The old swordsman's battle energy was nearly gone. His sword cracked and fallen to the ground. Then Giri stopped. He felt it. Every scrap of energy in the area was tilting toward one point. He turned. His demon eyes saw something he couldn't understand. Vivian's power was exploding upward, level 3 to 13 in minutes, and still climbing. Giri had lived thousands of years in the abyss and seen plenty of strong beings. He'd never seen anything go from ant to near master in a quarter of an hour with no sign of stopping. Then came the part that truly shook him. Green energy spread outward from Vivian in every direction. And wherever it touched ground that had been tainted by Giri's abyssal presence, the corruption dissolved, not suppressed, dissolved. Even holy light from the celestial temples can only push back abyssal energy. This girl was erasing it. Giri's grip on Whittle loosened for just a fraction of a second. That was enough. The old swordsman's sword flew back to his hand on its own. He slashed Giri's wrist, kicked off the demon's chest, and launched himself free. He landed, stumbling, but standing, gasping, the sword propped against the ground. Then a hand touched his shoulder. Vivian had walked up beside him. Warmth flowed from her palm into his body, not just healing the battle damage, but repairing old injuries and chronic problems he'd carried for decades. In a few breaths, he was better than he'd been at the start of the fight. Better than he'd been in years. He stared at her. He'd seen high-level healing magic. He'd seen temple archbishops perform divine miracles. Nothing came close to this effortless, this complete. It was like watching a real god work. "This is all a gift from that lord," Vivian said simply, as if stating something that needed no explanation. Whittle didn't fully understand who that lord was, but he made a silent vow. Whatever this being needed in the future, he would answer. Vivian turned to face Giri. She raised both hands. The earth split open. Massive vines erupted from deep underground, each one thick as a tree trunk, surging upward like giant serpents waking from sleep. They positioned themselves with perfect precision, sealing every escape route around Giri. The demon lashed out with his fire whip, wrapping it around the nearest vine. Abyssal flame roared over the surface, trying to burn it to ash. The vine glowed once, then it absorbed the fire. It used the demon's own flame as fuel to grow faster, completely unharmed, and kept coming. Panic flickered in Giri's eyes for the first time. His fire whip, his signature weapon, the thing he'd used to kill an elven legendary centuries ago, was useless. His flames were a form of abyssal power, and these vines fed on abyssal power. Everything was backwards. The vines didn't fear fire, they ate it. Dozens more vines surged toward him from every direction. He had no answer for them. Vivian stood at the center of the vine forest, energy pouring into her from the world itself. This was the world's reward, a gift to anyone who against spice to protect what lives. Today, this land was under her protection. Round 2 had begun. The battle turned into Giri's worst nightmare. Whittle would flash step through gaps in the vines, land a sword strike on the demon, then retreat before the fire whip could catch him. Every time Giri came close to finishing the old man, Vivian's vines and tree soldiers swarmed from every direction, tangling the demon's limbs. Then she'd send a pulse of green light to Whittle, and in a few breaths his wounds would close and his battle energy would refill completely. He'd flash back and fresh as morning. Vivian's power showed no sign of running out. Energy kept flowing into her from the world itself, endlessly. Giri started wondering if she was the world's secret child. The demon grew desperate. He was only a clone. His real body sat somewhere deep in the abyss. This clone's power supply was finite, and the world's rejection doubled every attack's cost. Each swing of his fire whip drained him faster than it should have. When he started glancing toward the city gates, Whittle caught it immediately. He's trying to run. Hold him. Vivian raised both hands and sealed every exit with walls of vines and tree soldiers. Geary smashed through one wave, another grew behind it. He broke left toward the gate. Dozen vines grabbed him, he tore them off. Whittle's sword landed in the same rib wound for the third time, widening it further. This went on for 3 full days. 3 days of continuous fighting in a burning city. Vivian's vines came in waves that never tired. Whittle never needed to rest. Every time his energy dropped halfway, Vivian topped him off with abundance power. The old swordsman fought for 72 hours straight without stopping once. Geary's fire whip shrank by a third. His flames flickered instead of blazing. His wounds accumulated. Whittle kept hitting the same spots, reopening them faster than the demon could seal them with magma. On the third evening, Geary sensed 3 powerful presences closing in fast. The strongest came from the capital, heavy and immovable as a mountain. That was the shield of the principality, a level 19 shield warrior with ancient giant blood. The other 2 came from north and south. The wolf of the north, the level 16 berserker, and a hammer of molten rock, the level 16 dwarf-blooded warrior. Whittle had sent emergency signal runes the moment Geary appeared. 3 runes to 3 directions, all activated at once. Calling for help against something you can't beat alone isn't shameful. It's smart. Geary knew it was over. 3 fresh fighters joining a battle he was already losing, no escape possible. He looked at Vivian, then at the old swordsman who'd been fighting him for 3 straight days. These 2 humans, a girl and an old man, had pinned him down and ground him to nothing. Then he made his last move, pulled his fire whip back into his body, formed a massive flame greatsword in both hands, and drove it straight into the ground. The earth shattered. For miles in every direction, the ground cracked into an irregular web. Dark red erupted from deep below. Air twisted with melted. Stone went soft. The entire area began sinking. A technique, powered by a sliver of his real body's legendary rank power, forced into the clone's magic core far beyond safe limits. Everything within miles was being dragged into a lake of lava. Old streets, rubble, the broken fountain statue, the crater where the bell tower fell, all swallowed by magma, outlines erased. Massive mushroom cloud of molten rock rose from the city's center, painting the evening sky an ominous dark red. The clone's magic core nearly shattered from the strain. The 3 reinforcements arrived at the edge of the devastation simultaneously. The shield of the principality stood at the front, an enormous build, holding a tower shield taller than himself, covered in alchemical runes. Where the city center had been, there was now only a sea of glowing orange and dark red lava. The wolf of the north and the hammer of molten rock stood at opposite edges, staring in silence. Nobody spoke, the magma still bubbled. Occasionally, the tip of the clock tower poked above the surface for a moment, then sank slowly, like a drowning man's last reach. At the very center, in the deepest part of the lava, nothing was visible at all. The 3 reinforcements arrived at the edge of what used to be Sun City, and found a lake of lava where the city center had been. Not streets, buildings, the Baron's mansion, all gone. Only a stub of city wall remained at the edge. The shield of the principality, the level 19, ancient giant blood, stood at the front with his massive rune-covered shield. Behind him, the wolf of the north, Ragnar, level 16 berserker, and a hammer of molten rock, Brock, level 16 dwarf-blooded warrior. Ragnar studied the devastation. What did Whittle's family mess with? This kind of power is near legendary. Identified it immediately. Scorching World Ring, a fire demon's signature kill move. Its abyssal power centered on itself. Turns everything within hundreds of meters to lava. Below legendary rank, theoretically nobody survives. Ragnar cracked a grim smile. Well, it's not my territory. Nance Barney's having a bad day. Though if Whittle dead, I wouldn't mind picking up a few of his northern lands. Then a sound came from the lava's depths. The dying, rasping growl. That core of the molten lake, Geary knelt broken. His fire main was almost entirely out. His clone body was ruined. Abyssal power completely drained. Clone was finished, then footsteps. A green glow rising through the dark red magma. Vivian and Whittle walked out of the light. Their clothes were scorched and torn, but underneath not a scratch. Not even eyes went wide. He'd watched the lava swallow them. He'd felt their life signs nearly vanish. A strike carrying a sliver of his true body's legendary power. Below legendary, no one should survive, but they had. When the scorching world ring hit, Vivian was engulfed and nearly died. The abundance power inside her activated on its own and dragged her back from death's edge. The moment she opened her eyes, and she reached for Whittle. Barely a breath left in him, and poured abundance into his body, pulling him back, too. But Whittle paid a price. He had no abundance of his own. Giri's attack had burned away most of his life essence. My power could heal his wounds, but couldn't replace what was burned. From now on he'd need Vivian to regularly replenish his life force, or he'd slowly wither like a leaking barrel. You survived my scorching world ring harmed, Giri rasped. Possible. Below legendary no one lives. No one. Vivian's voice was perfectly calm, a mere fire demon. How could you understand my master's power? Compared to my master, you are dust on the ground, and he is the sun in the sky. There is no comparison. Giri froze, then he laughed. The fury dressed as laughter. Dust and sun? You're a bastard mortal. Legendary fire demon lord. Veteran of the last abyssal invasion. Killer of 2 legendaries. The demon whose fire whip slew a dwarven prince whose scorching world ring melted an elven war tree. Teenage girl was telling him he was dirt compared to her master. Humiliation burned away his last shred of reason. If he was going to die, he'd take them with him. His body began to swell. The final reserve of power surged from his core. White-hot light burst from every crack in his skin. Immolation, a fire demon's death technique. Or self-destruct. Drag everything nearby into oblivion. The lake's edge, Ger's face changed. He grabbed Ragnar and Brock, yanked them back, and threw his giant shield up in front of all 3. Another explosion tore from the lake's center. Orange fire shot skyward. Lava rained down in every direction. This blast was smaller than the first. Giri's clone had nothing left. Even his self-destruct was weakened. When the shockwave faded, sulfur and cooling lava choked the air. Surviving soldiers and civilians stood at the lake's edge. Escapees from the city, troops from outside the walls, surrendered guards and mercenaries, all staring at the smoking crater in silence. Then 2 sets of footsteps came from inside the fire. Vivian and Whittle walked out of the molten lake a second time. Clothes covered in ash and burn holes, but their bodies untouched. The first soldier knelt. Then another. Then dozens, then hundreds. No city guards. Mercenary deserters. Nope, noble retainers. Regular infantry. All kneeling on the same scorched earth, facing the same direction. Ger set his giant shield aside. Bill dropped to one knee, pressed his fist to his chest, and bowed to Vivian, a level 19 warrior, the principality's strongest guardian, paying respect to the girl who'd held a fire demon for 3 days and walked out of its death twice. Ragnar and Brock looked at each other, set their weapons down, and knelt, too. 2 of the realm's strongest fighters bowed to the teenager who had walked out of hell. Vivian left the lava lake with Whittle behind her. The old swordsman held Giri's gray-black severed head in one hand and half a sword hilt in the other. His blade of decades had shattered in the final explosion. Vivian's clothes were burned to rags, but underneath her skin was flawless. What neither of them noticed yet was the faint dark red mark on both their chests. Giri's parting gift. The instant his core detonated, 2 nearly invisible threads of dark energy shot out and burrowed into them both. Permanent tracking curse branded in a demon lord's name. From now on, any cultist who worships Giri will sense that mark if they get close enough. They'll come like sharks smelling blood, relentless, suicidal. Worse, if Vivian or Whittle ever step into any plane that has contact with the abyss, Giri's real body will track them down personally. Not a clone, the actual legendary fire demon lord who's killed multiple legendaries over thousands of years. That's demons for you. He traded his clone's total destruction for a chance at eternal revenge. Petty to the bone. Vivian stopped at the edge of the lava lake, took the demon's head from Whittle, and raised it high above her. Tens of thousands of people, soldiers, citizens, nobles, mercenaries knelt on the scorched ground before her. I'm Vivian's son, rightful blood of the Sun Baron house. Today I claim the 21st generation barony. This catastrophe, the invasion, the demon, was caused by a usurper who betrayed family law and invited abyssal evil onto our land. But I stand here now with this demon's head as proof. From today I am the sole lawful ruler of the Sun Barony. All remnants of rebellion will be settled. The broken city will be rebuilt. The scattered people will be protected. No noble council vote. No royal charter. No bishop's blessing, just a teenage girl in burned rags holding a fire demon skull over a lake of lava. That was her credential. And it was worth more than any piece of paper. Anyone who disagreed was welcome to go kill their own demon. The 6 contracted knights responded first. Then Lane and Rod and all of Vivian's sworn knights. Then her soldiers. Then the rescued citizens. Finally the surrendered city guards. The mercenary turncoats. No, the noble retainers. The tens of thousands. All hailing the same name. Ger, the shield of the principality. Watched it, all. Exchanged glances with Ragnar and Brock. Ragnar was staring at the demon head with eyes like saucers, muttering something that looked like, "That really is a damn fire demon." Brock just grunted. Ger stepped forward. "In the name of the royal house, I recognize your title. Son, 21st Baron of the Sun Barony." He paused, then continued. "In recognition of the Sun family's outstanding service during this demonic invasion, The royal house grants the Sun Barony the legal right to expand westward and the authority to appoint, dismiss all nobles below Viscount rank. Either reward alone would make the other 3 barons green with envy. Westward expansion meant Vivian could push her borders all the way to Sunset Forest Edge. Every unclaimed patch of wilderness, every mine, every clearing without needing royal approval. The appointment authority meant she could promote or remove her own lesser nobles without waiting for the capital's slow bureaucracy. The principality's history, that kind of power was reserved for royal blood. Giving it to a border baron was a first. Nobody objected. Not because they didn't want to, because they knew better. The cheering wouldn't stop. Citizens screamed her name. Soldiers beat sword hilts against shields. Nobles bowed so deep some nearly folded in half. Hard to tell if they were genuinely moved or desperately making up for backing the wrong side. Vivian stood at the center of it all, demon's skull still in hand, looking west toward Sunset Forest. She smiled the proper smile, nodded to the crowd, gestured for kneeling knights to rise, said the right words to the right people. But inside she had only one thought. Thank you, my dragon lord. After the battle, the 3 strongest fighters in the principality each came to speak with Vivian privately. The shield told her she'd done well. He didn't ask about her master, just said that every strong person has secrets, and if she ever needed the principality's support, they'd remember today. Ragnar the wolf was more blunt. What are you doing with that head? If you hang it on the gate, hang it high so dogs can't grab it. Vivian told him she'd have it made into a specimen for her new council hall. Northern Baron is welcome to visit any time. Ragnar laughed hard and told Whittle his great-great-granddaughter was more interesting than he was. Brock, the hammer, looked up at her. He was half a head shorter and said his family owed her. That demon had established itself, his mines would have been next. He offered her iron weapons and ore at 80% market price. They shook hands and he left. What nobody noticed yet were the faint dark red marks on Vivian's and Whittle's chests. Geary's final revenge. The instant his core exploded, 2 invisible threads of dark energy burrowed into them both. A permanent tracking curse in a demon lord's name. Any cultist who worships Geary will sense them if they get close enough and come hunting. Relentless, suicidal. Worse, if either of them ever enters a plane connected to the abyss, Geary's real body will follow the mark and come personally. Not a clone, the actual legendary lord. That's how demons operate. Trade a clone's destruction for eternal revenge. Then case the trial. Eileen was dragged in by 2 guards. And she was broken. Nord hair tangled. Drool on her chin. Pupils unfocused. Mumbling the same words over and over. I summoned him. I won. A priest from the capital examined her. Combination of the cultist's mind corruption spells and prolonged exposure to the demon's abyssal aura had shattered her sanity. She couldn't think straight anymore. She was finished as a political figure. Vivian studied her stepmother for a long time, calculating not personal revenge but what served the barony best. Killing her would feel good but produce nothing useful. The boar, the level 11 knight, was still alive. Note, some retreating soldiers had dragged him out. An 11-level knight was worth trading 1 moment of satisfaction for his permanent loyalty. Of course, he'd have to sign a master-servant contract afterward. Eileen Burt. And Vivian said, you conspired with abyssal cultists. They summoned a fire demon onto our land, turned Sun City to lava, and killed thousands. Each charge deserves death 10 times over, but I won't kill you. She stripped Eileen of everything: titles, positions, no property. Sentenced her to permanent imprisonment in a guarded estate. No visitors without Vivian's permission. Never allowed to leave. This isn't mercy. Killing you now would be too easy. Live. Wake up every day remembering what you lost. Fall asleep every night remembering how you lost it. Whittle, leaning against a tent post, gave a very slight nod. For the family, this was the smartest move. No blood relative killing scandal, a clean resolution. Then the tent flap opened and soldiers carried in Boar on a stretcher, wrapped head to toe in bandages. He'd insisted on coming. Told them he'd crawl if they wouldn't carry him. He rolled off the stretcher onto his knees, forehead in the mud, reopened wounds bleeding through the bandages. Thank you for sparing her life. From today this life belongs only to you. Vivian bent down and lifted him by the arm. I don't need you to die for me. Do your job well, you'll get what you deserve. His eyes went red, nobody pointed it out. 5 days later, Vivian held the first awards ceremony. She honored every promise she'd made. Every title, every estate, every gold coin. Not one name forgotten, not one payment delayed. Rod and the 6 contracted knights received noble titles. Rod became commander of the Baron's 1st Cavalry Regiment. The 6 became squadron captains. Lane walked up and Vivian handed him his papers. Hereditary Baron, your estate includes the former Burt family manor and surrounding farmland. Your family is now permanent nobility of the Sun Barony. You earned this. He knelt, took the document, and after a long pause said, I fixed the honey cake recipe. More honey, less flour. I'll bring you some next time. Vivian's mouth twitched. I'll be waiting. Every surviving level 8 and 9 knight received noble titles with land and positions. Every promise kept, every debt paid. Word spread from the tent outward through the camp, louder and louder. Nobles who'd been hesitating about which side to support heard the news, immediately ripped their old family crests from their sleeves, replacing them with the Sun family's silver vine banner. 7 days after the battle, Vivian issued her first rebuilding order. Old Sun City was a lava scar, so she chose open high ground east of the ruins. A river branch, wild fruit forest, and the barony's main trade roads surrounded it. The builders said the wall foundation alone would take 3 months. Vivian said she wouldn't need that long. She had everyone step back, took off her boots and stood barefoot on the dirt. Then she knelt and pressed both hands into the earth. Abundance power poured from her palms into the ground. The first vine broke through, at the exact point where the main street would meet the central plaza. Then hundreds more erupted along the city blueprint she held in her mind, weaving together into building frames, on-street patterns, plaza outlines. Mud giants rose from the earth along the wall foundation line. Each stood bigger than a full-grown ogre and pounded the soil flat with massive fists. The ground shook with every blow. Tree people walked slowly from the northern fruit forest with enormous steps and settled into position. Their trunks split into wall panels, their branches wove into roof frames, their roots spread underground as natural foundation reinforcement. A child who'd been crying stopped and tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mama, the mud people are building us houses." In a few hours, an entire city skeleton stood on the hilltop. Walls, streets, plaza, governor's mansion, barracks, residential quarter, market district. The details would take craftsmen weeks to fill in, but the bones of a city had grown from bare earth in a single day. One builder squatted by the wall he'd said would take 3 months, touched the compacted earth and muttered, "My whole career was pointless." Then he took off his hat and bowed toward Vivian. The crowd and cheered, "Long live Sun City! Long live Baroness Vivian!" A child rode his father's shoulders, waving wildly at her. She didn't turn around. She just raised her hand once, then walked away. She was too exhausted to even accept the cheering. News traveled faster than horses. That night, the northern baron's spies heard bards singing about a golden-haired girl who stood barefoot in mud and grew a city from the earth. The baron said nothing, just ordered trade tariffs halved for Sun Baron caravans and filed the intelligence report in the deepest drawer of his desk. Brock the Hammer heard about it and quietly dropped his iron prices another 10% on top of the 80% he'd already promised. The royal palace, Gur showed the king Vivian's award documents. King asked one question. "This master she mentions, did you find out who it is?" Gur shook his head. "No. And her power doesn't match any known divine system in the royal archives." The king was quiet for a moment. "No, perhaps not knowing is better. Some beings are more trouble to know about." Intelligence reports spread to every power in the region. Northern Baron, the Dwarf Kingdom, the Southern Fortress, small principalities to the east and beyond. Every report said the same thing. New Baroness Vivian's son, suspected apostle of an unknown powerful entity, capable of mass plant generation and earth manipulation, power sources known. Preliminary assessment, master rank or above. Every report ended with the same note. Recommend observation for now, but everyone was singing her name. Vivian sat alone in her temporary study, staring at her hands. On her left hand, thin translucent ginkgo leaf patterns were emerging from her knuckles. They spread up her forearm, leaf shapes connected by fine vine-like lines. No pain, no discomfort. That was the frightening part. Her body wasn't rejecting this change. It was welcoming it, treating it as something that had always belonged. This was the price of abundance. 3 days of extreme combat pushed the power deep into her flesh. 2 near-deaths from the scorching world ring and the immolation forced it into her very bones. Every time she should have died, abundance pulled her back. But power is never free. The more she used, the deeper it merged with her body. Building an entire city's framework consumed energy on a completely different scale from the battlefield. Every vine, every mud giant, every tree person was abundance, directly reshaping the physical world. Cost? Her own body was slowly becoming part of the power. It was reshaping her into a better vessel for itself. Right now it was just a few leaf patterns hidden under her sleeves. But what about next time? The time after? At what point would she stop being herself? She pulled her sleeves down and covered the marks. Outside, the new city's vine skeleton glowed faintly green in the darkness, residual abundance still releasing. In the distance, the old lava lake had fully cooled into a black scar of volcanic rock across the land. She understood. The only person who could help her with this was me. She could feel through the contract that I was in deep sleep, still transforming. That brief moment when I'd opened my eyes and glanced at her through the thread, that was an accident, a half-conscious flicker. All she could do now was wait. Back in Sunset Forest, inside my sealed vine palace, my body continued to grow. What was happening in the Abundance tribe while I slept? That was a story still unfolding. It started with a night guard outside my sleeping hall. He noticed green light drifting out through the sealed vines. Faint glowing particles that dissolved into the air. Then dozens of wildflowers sprouted at his feet, going from a seed to full bloom in a few breaths. He grabbed his partner and ran. Grak was out at the Venom Pig Pen, his favorite place 10 miles west of headquarters. He was watching the latest batch of piglets eat when the guard came crash in, nearly falling into the pen, gasping. The Dragon Lord's hall, something's happening. Grak sprinted back. By the time he arrived, the changes had gone full scale. Kobold miners sitting outside their barracks had patches of green scales growing on their arms. Dragon blood concentration was surging across the whole settlement, a mass ancestral awakening. One miner stared at his scaled-up friend, then checked himself. Nothing. He looked disappointed. The gnolls had it even wilder. Now some level 2 hunters woke up with fur thick as bear's claws, shiny black. One gnoll stared at his reflection in a water basin, touching his new fangs, mumbling, "Am I more handsome now?" The half-elf archer nearby rolled her eyes. But that archer had her own discovery. She could suddenly make plants move. It felt like the magical talent awakening the elders used to tell stories about. The settlement walls were covered in thick vines overnight, turning rough wooden fences into solid green barriers. Unknown flowers poked through watchtower posts. Outside the walls, what used to be scrubland had sprouted into groves of towering trees. Rare magical herbs covered the ground, silver-veined leaves that half-elf herbalists identified as some of the rarest species in their reference books. Plants that normally take years to find were now growing like weeds along the wall. All of this was my abundance power leaking out during my transformation, spilling into the land and everything living on it. Grak stood in the middle of the chaos and started giving orders like the veteran he is. "Sis runners east and west. Bring back Brew, Buck, Jiray and Rawl. Tell them something's happening at headquarters." He pointed at the flowers and trees exploding around them. "Tell come see for themselves." He set up protocols fast. Everyone showing physical changes. Gather in the central clearing sorted by race. Kobolds left, gnolls right, half-elf center. Everyone normal keeps working. 1 mile exclusion zone around my hill, double patrols, nobody enters without his say-so. Staff stays on site, no traveling back and forth. Any changes in the Venom Pigs, report immediately. He was the most senior member at headquarters, the very first kobold to find me. All 4 leaders away, he was acting chief and nobody questioned it. Over the next 2 days, the changes kept spreading outward from my sleeping hall. Nature sprites appeared on the second day. Ent things, smaller than a kobold's fist, half-transparent with thin leaf-shaped wing. They drifted out of blooming flowers and started tending the new magical herb patches, cleaning dewdrops off leaves, fingers and needles, straightening bent petals. Kobold patrol guard tried to poke one with his finger. The sprite dodged, slapped his fingertip hard with both tiny hands, then huffed angrily and flew off clutching a dewdrop bigger than its own body to another flower. The guard stared at his finger and laughed. Then came the tree people. They were born from ancient trees that had absorbed my leaking abundance power. Each one was different. Some were gentle. They'd help clear paths blocked by overgrown vines. Others were violent. One newborn tree person started swinging branches at everything in sight, launched a gnoll patrol guard through the air. Had to be chopped into firewood by Grak personally. He cursed the whole time he was cutting it down. My power was reshaping the land around me while I slept, turning the Abundance Tribe's territory into something no one had ever seen before. Brew and Buck arrived first. The eastern mines weren't far. Brew stood at the gate and didn't recognize the place. The settlement he'd left behind had become a green kingdom. Vines covered the walls, unknown flowers bloomed everywhere, and the air itself felt more alive. Both brothers noticed their own strength growing the closer they got to headquarters. Bottlenecks loosening, life force surging. Ral came the next evening from the western hunting grounds. Experience. The nearer he got, the stronger he felt. When he saw rogue tree people attacking patrols, he immediately put his gnoll hunters into the rotation. Jirai arrived last on the 3rd morning. The half-elf settlements were the most complex to organize before leaving. When she landed, everyone noticed her dragon wings had changed. Wheat stalk patterns now traced across the membranes. Crack briefed them all. The good news, most of the tribe's members were getting stronger. Kobolds were growing green scales as their dragon blood thickened. Gnolls were developing sharper fangs and claws. As half-elves had awakened natural magic talent. Nature sprites, tiny transparent things with leaf-shaped wings, had appeared from blooming flowers and were tending the new magical herb gardens. Rare medicinal plants that normally take years to find were growing like weeds along the walls. The bad news started on the 3rd day. Some individuals couldn't handle the power surge. Those with weak bodies or unstable minds began losing control. Kobold miner started talking to himself in a corner, eyes glowing empty green. Silver ginkgo leaves grew over his arms. Vines pushed from his fingernails. Green shoots sprouted from his back. When a friend tried to pull him up, The miner's mouth opened. Nothing inside but tangled flower petals. He attacked. Ral's patrol pinned him down. Ral drove a spear through his heart without hesitating. The body kept growing plants even after death. They had to burn it. Everyone who watched the fire was quiet. They'd known that miner hard worker. Never caused trouble. Just yesterday he'd been bragging about 3 new scales on his arm, saying maybe he'd become a warrior someday. More cases followed. A gnoll hunter went berserk during patrol. Fangs grew through his own upper jaw, fur turned dark green. He tore apart a caged creature and attacked his squad leader. Ral killed him personally. The blood that sprayed out was thick green sap that sprouted into a bush the instant it hit the ground. Ral looked at the bush, then told his hunters, From now on, if you see a comrade losing control, don't hesitate. Don't be soft. If you're soft, you're the one who dies. The half-elves had casualties too. The young archer, the one who'd been joking days earlier about awakening magical talent, ran screaming from her barracks one night, her body wrapped in ginkgo leaves, only half her mouth still visible. She collapsed at the base of the wall, and plants erupted from her body, growing wildly until she became a small garden. When Giara reached her, the archer still had a flicker of consciousness. She turned her remaining half-mouth toward Giara and whispered, "Please, Lady Giara, kill me." It hurt so much Giara said nothing. She placed one hand on the archer's forehead, drew her short sword with the other, and did what needed to be done. Then she plucked a green branch from the spot, handed it to the archer's companion and said, "Plant this on her grave." The companion took it, put it in her quiver, and covered her face with both hands, crying. Brew and Buck handled the kobold failures more matter-of-factly. Brew carried his axe. Buck walked behind with a list who could be saved, who couldn't. Those who couldn't were sent off with one swing. Bodies burned together. Buck noticed that after the ashes cooled, small silver flowers grew from them, a species he'd never seen before. The cleanup took 2 full days. By the second evening, all 4 leaders had counted their losses. The vast majority adapted successfully. Locked potential awakened, ancestral traits surfacing, new talents blooming. But those whose minds weren't strong enough, whose bodies couldn't take the strain, became the price of this wave of transformation. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. My power offered an opportunity, but it didn't guarantee everyone would survive the gift. On the 5th evening, the 4 leaders met in a temporary command tent at the base of my hill. Grax stood at the entrance, mud splattered, his old shoulder scar glowing faintly in the green light. Strangely, he himself hadn't changed much, just a vague feeling of being slightly different. "The master is still sleeping," Grax reported. The green light leaking from the hall had started to decrease. Jirai looked up at the fading glow. "We don't know what's happening to the Dragon Lord, but our job is simple. Hold the Abundance tribe together." Bruce stood up, the scales on his back shinier than ever. "Clean up everything we can. When the master physics up, he should see a tribe in order, not a mess." Nobody argued. The 4 leaders went back to their posts. Inside the sealed hall on the hilltop, a massive heart beat slowly and powerfully. With every pulse, the Abundance tribe changed a little more. The creatures living within it were adapting in their own ways. Some grew stronger, while others felt a power they couldn't contain. Opportunity and disaster were wrapped in the same green light. What each creature received depended entirely on itself. The 4 leaders sat in the command tent with Grax records spread across the table. Good news and bad news, all tangled together, all caused by power leaking from my sleeping body. Dry identified the core problem first. The beasts aren't coming for us. They're coming for the master's power. To them it smells like honey. Brew's solution was straightforward. Kill however many show up. I'll pull half my forces from the eastern mines. But Buck saw deeper. The master's power doesn't pick sides. It strengthens everything it touches, us and the beasts. The real question is how long this lasts. If it's short, we can handle forest beasts and small if it goes on long enough to attract things from the deep forest. He didn't finish the thought. Ral confirmed the trend. His gnolls had caught a level 6 ironhide rhino the day before. A creature that normally stays in the mid-forest and never comes to the outer edge. Even after they cut its legs off, it kept crawling toward headquarters. "This isn't random," he said. "It's only going to get worse." Right on cue, a bloody gnoll scalp burst into the tent. Over 100 beasts heading their way from the west. That shadow wolves, iron tusk boars, gnawed stone-armored pythons, and unknown species. They were even fighting each other, but all moving in the same direction toward my hill. They planned the defense quickly. Buck drew a map on the ground, pushed the defense line outward in layers, intercept beasts before they reached the walls, thin the numbers through multiple rings of resistance. Brew would pull 200 shield fighters from the eastern mines to hold the east. Ral would bring back half his western hunters for ambush and harassment in the dense forest. Gnolls fight best that way. Jirai would call in 50 newly trained half-elf rangers from the Gurla settlement for range support on the open southern approach. Buck would handle the northern cliffside with traps and magic. Grak would stay inside managing internal order, logistics, medical care, and the venom pigs. Some of the boars had been acting strange since the changes, eating twice as much, gaining weight rapidly. Could be good, could be bad. Not someone had to watch them. Then Brew raised something more important than any patrol report. He pulled out a chart Buck had made while clearing the failed transformations. Pattern was unexpected. It wasn't about strength. The level 4 warrior lost control while a level 3 miner right next to him grew beautiful scales and volunteered for tree person cleanup duty. The strong gnoll who looked down on other races went berserk, while a weaker gnoll who got along with everyone stayed perfectly stable. 2 half-elf archers awakened the exact same vine magic. One lost control by day 3, fingers turning to wood. The other used it to bandage teammates' wounds with perfect precision. The difference wasn't power level. It was willpower. It was character. Those who could keep their minds steady, who cared about others, who had something worth holding on to. They adapted. Those who were selfish, unstable, or hollow inside got consumed by the power. Jirai studied the chart carefully. This discovery is worth more than every patrol report combined. Mental stability is the key. We can't screen people for headquarters duty based on combat level alone. Buck proposed a simple test. Anyone assigned to headquarters must spend 1 full day at the base of my hill. No bad reactions, they stay. Mild symptoms that resolve on their own, 3 days observation. Signs of losing control, immediate transfer to outer posts. Jerry added one more rule. This standard applies to everyone, not just regular soldiers. All 4 of us and every squad leader get tested regularly, too. No exceptions. Everything is for the Dragon Lord. Everything is for the tribe. Nobody objected. After they split up, Grak headed toward the pig pen. He paused once, looking back at my hill. Part of him wanted to take the test, too. He was the very first kobold to find me. Felt wrong not to try. Then he remembered the pigs hadn't been fed. He shook his head and kept walking. The Dragon Lord gave him that job personally. In his eyes, feeding those pigs was the most important mission in the world right now. Sky and Earth may be vast, but feeding the pigs comes first. Ralph left before dawn with a dozen of his fastest hunters. He needed to get to the western hunting grounds, pick up reinforcements, and get back as quickly as possible. On the way, he noticed the forest had changed since his last trip. Thicker canopy, fatter vines, mushrooms twice their normal size. When he stopped at a stream to drink, his reflection surprised him. Fur nearly double its old thickness, fangs half an inch longer than before, curved and sharper. He touched the tip with a claw, then moved on. The hunting camp. He'd sent word ahead to pull 200 hunters for headquarters defense. More than 200 volunteered. These were the younger generation, born and raised in the Abundance tribe, loyal to the bone. They'd heard about the changes at headquarters and saw it as a chance to get stronger. As for the risk of failing the transformation in the wilderness, staying weak is worse than dying. Ral picked exactly 200 of the strongest. That afternoon, 220 gnoll hunters lined up. Ral stood at the front, raised his claw, then showed his new fangs, and said one sentence, Dragon Lord above. Loyalty, 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 loyalty. They roared back, and the column marched toward headquarters. Back at base, Ral spread his hunters along the western forest paths in staggered defense lines. Small beast groups get killed on the spot. Large herds get harassed and pulled into ambush zones. He positioned himself at the very front between the first and second lines. An old chief never leads from safety. The level 7 raging forest elephant smashed through the trees. The full size bigger than normal. Tusks dragging torn vines, eyes blank and chaotic. Head straight for headquarters. Rill waved his scouts back and walked toward it alone. The elephant charged, tusks aimed at his chest. At 5 paces, Ral sidestepped and raked his right claw upward across the inner thigh, one of the few unarmored spots on the beast. The skin split cleanly, blood sprayed, soaking half his body. The elephant's front leg buckled. Before it could turn its head for another strike, Ral was already on its back. Rear claws dug into the thick skin folds for grip. He raised both front claws and drove them into the gap between skull and spine. One strike. The elephant crashed down, flattening a patch of flowers. His scouts stared. They'd seen Ral hunt before, but a level 7 forest elephant usually took a whole team hours to grind down. Ral just killed one in moments. He jumped off and looked at his claws, blood still dripping, a faint dark gold sheen along the edges of his nails. He licked one claw tip and shook the blood from his fur. Before today, breaking through that kind of thick hide was the hardest part of any hunt. Fangs left shallow dents, claws made scratches at best. You'd need a spear through the eye or throat for a real kill. Today his claws went through elephant's skin like it wasn't there. The dragon blood inside him was making everything sharper and hungrier. His appetite had bloated lately, rivaling an ogre's. He washed his face in the stream and looked at his reflection again. Fangs even longer than this morning. The line from ear to jaw sharper, more defined. He didn't look like a gnoll anymore. More like a werewolf. Reflexes faster. Even healing had sped up. A hit from the elephant's ear had bruised his left shoulder during the fight. By the time he checked it at the stream, the pain was completely gone. He stood and looked toward headquarters. He didn't understand magical theory, didn't know about abundance, or power overflow or ancestral awakening. But one thing he was absolutely certain of, everything good happening to him was because of the day he chose to drop his weapons and follow me. He'd made plenty of wrong decisions in his life. That one was right. A scout ran back with news. Hundreds of goblins spotted 5 miles west, mixed in with more beasts, numbers still growing. Ral cleared his mind and signaled his hunters. Full combat formation, head-on engagement. 200 gnolls rose silently from the forest shadows, and spears gripped tight, fangs bared, eyes glowing faint green in the dim forest light. Ral charged first. Somewhere on his skin, beneath the fur, where vine scratches had healed, a faint green shimmer pulsed once and vanished. He didn't notice. He wasn't worried about goblins. A few hundred green runts. He could handle them alone even if they doubled. But Buck's warning echoed in his mind. If my transformation kept going long enough, it wouldn't just attract goblins and elephants. The truly terrifying things in the deep forest, the ones even ogres won't approach, would eventually come too. He didn't know when that day would arrive. He just knew that until it did, he needed to kill more beasts and push the defense line further out. And in the deepest part of the forest, something was already stirring. A tree so massive that 100 gnolls couldn't wrap their arms around it was slowly changing shape. Its trunk was hollow inside. In the darkness of that hollow, a pair of green dragon eyes was opening. Something that had been hidden in the deep forest for a very long time had finally been awakened by my leaking power. New competition was about to begin. There was another green dragon in Sunset Forest. His name was Ethers, and he'd been hiding in the core region for a very long time. He was 12 meters long, dark green scales perfect for blending into dense forest. A green dragon on the edge of adulthood. His lair was a massive hollow ancient tree so huge that 100 gnolls couldn't wrap their arms around it. From outside, just a tree. Insides, packed with gold coins, gems, magic item fragments, and the skull of an ogre warlord. Years ago, that ogre warlord, level 16, master rank, had ruled the forest core with an army of ogres, goblins, bear goblins, the snake people tribe he'd conquered by force. Ethers was still a young dragon. The warlord hadn't taken him seriously. The young green dragon, not even master rank. What threat could he pose? The warlord was wrong. Ethers secretly turned the snake people before the fight. Their leader, Emma, level 13, armed with a nerve toxin-coated spear that kills anything below master rank in 10 breaths, hit the ogre army from behind while Ethers attacked from the front. The warlord died without ever realizing his own subjects had been turned against him. Ethers kept his promise. The snake people got their freedom and territory in exchange for becoming his core vassals. Now he had 6 snake commanders above level 10, thousands of snake warriors, plus himself, the green dragon about to break into master rank, an absolute regional power. But he'd never expanded outward, not one step. That was what made him smarter than most dragons. He'd watched other powerful monster tribes get destroyed by neighboring nations forming alliances against them. He'd even seen an iron dragon fall to a dozen master rank fighters working together. He knew that the moment he pushed beyond the deep forest, surrounding kingdoms would come for him. 5 or 6 masters would be enough to kill him in his current stage. So he stayed hidden, quiet, build strengths, ordering his snake people to never venture past the mid-forest. Patient, as only a green dragon can be, waiting until he reached legendary before revealing himself to the world. Then my power reached him. Over a month ago, the abundance leaking from my sleeping body seeped through the deep earth and entered his magical senses. Warm, growing, perfectly aligned with a green dragon's natural affinity for plants, and carrying a faint edge of danger. He tried to ignore it, forced himself to stay calm, but the scent got stronger every day. It kept him awake, disrupted his sleep, gnawed at him constantly. Today he finally gave in. His eyes opened in the dark hollow, and they were full of greed. He was convinced if he could find the source and devour it, he could break through to legendary. Nothing in his entire bloodline memory, thousands of years of dragon knowledge, described anything this perfectly suited to green dragon evolution. Need 20 years, maybe 30 at most. Legendary rank, the threshold that most dragons never cross in their entire lives. Once that thought took root, he couldn't push it back down. But his survival instincts, the same caution that had kept him alive all these years, held him back from charging out blindly. Emma, come here. The snake woman leader appeared within minutes, Lower body a serpent's tail covered in dark green scales, upper body humanoid with smooth skin above the waist. Her poisoned spear never left her side. "You're awake, master," she said, voice carrying that distinctive serpentine allure. "Do you smell it?" Emma closed her eyes, extended her senses. After a moment she opened them, puzzled. "No, master, I sense nothing unusual. So only I can feel it. Other doesn't belong to the abyss or the elemental planes or any known divine system. It's something I've never encountered before, and it fits green dragon power perfectly. If I consume its source I can break through to legendary." He paused. "And find it. I don't care how many scouts you send or what methods you use. Find the source." Then, as caution kicked in, "But I'm warning you, no matter what you see, no matter how weak it looks, do not attack. Do not disturb anyone. Do not reveal our position. Find it, map everything. The source, its location, guards, net surrounding forces. Every detail, and report back. We've survived this long because we never expose ourselves. This time is no different." Emma bowed and slipped out silently. She went straight to her camp and summoned all 6 snake commanders. She repeated Ether's orders word for word. The 6 departed in 6 different directions, snake scouts spreading outward from the deep forest core through the mid-layer toward the outer edge. Fast, silent, precise as a walking machine. Meanwhile, on the outer forest's western defense line, Ral was crouching behind a fallen tree, cleaning blood from his fangs after repelling a second wave of beasts. His left shoulder was still numb from his stone-armored python's tail strike. He had no idea that deep in the forest, a green dragon far older than me had turned his hungry gaze toward my territory. He had no idea that snake people scouts were already moving silently in his direction. He just wiped his claws clean, stood up, and signaled his hunters. "Get ready, next wave incoming." Jiray arrived at the western front with 300 half-elf rangers just as Ral's hunters were running out of steam. Less than half of Ral's 200 were still standing, the rest wounded, bandaging themselves against tree roots with torn strips of hide. Jiray took one look at the carnage and the exhausted hunters. "We're late." Ral wiped blood off his claws with a scrap of fur. "You're here, that's enough. The waves are getting bigger. Level 10s are starting to show up." Pointed at the corpse of a stone-armored python, the size of a forest elephant. Head pierced through, but it had crushed several gnolls before dying. "I'll take over from here," Jerry said. They didn't need a strategy meeting. Both knew exactly where to stand. Jerry flew overhead, covering the whole battlefield with her eyes. Ral stayed at the very front, shoulder to shoulder with his strongest fighters, about a dozen mutated gnolls who'd come through the transformation with regeneration abilities rivaling ogres. Their wounds stopped bleeding in seconds. Broken bones healed in half a day. The price was monstrous hunger. They ate several times more than normal gnolls. Dead beasts from the battlefield went to them first. In return they took the most dangerous job, absorbing the first charge of every wave with their own bodies. 2 races fit together perfectly. Half-elf archers and vine controllers provided ranged fire and crowd control from behind. Gnoll hunters held the front line and delivered killing blows up close. Arrows sealed escape routes, vines locked down movement. Fangs finished the job. Against level 5 beasts and below, the archers handled almost everything alone. Against levels 6 through 9, the plant-wielding half-elves trapped beasts with vines and tree soldiers while gnolls flanked and tore them apart. Level 10 and above, Ral and Jari dealt with personally. The level 10 black-scaled python burst from the trees. Ral bit through its neck scales from the front while Jari put a sword arrow through its skull from above. The level 11 ground-splitting bear smashed through the vine wall, used her dragon wings to blast in its face. When it reared up roaring, Ral tore open its belly from below. Quick, clean, barely a scratch on either of them. Wave after wave broke against the defense courses piled into hills. Forest elephants and armored boars at the bottom. Pythons and unknown beasts in the middle. Goblins and small creatures on top. Blood hadn't dried on one layer before the next wave climbed over it, and got pinned down by arrows, becoming the next layer. By the time Ral killed the last beast of the day, the sky was dark. He stood on the corpse hill, covered in blood, mostly not his own. Every wound slowly closing. From a distance he looked like a statue standing on a mountain of the dead, only his chest moving. Nwa sat on a fallen tree wiping her sword. 300 rangers scattered across the line, mending bowstrings, then counting arrows, resting against roots. Gnoll hunters carved edible meat from the corpse piles. A forest elephant leg would feed them for days. Then both Ral and Gerla stopped talking at the same instant and turned toward the same direction, the western shadows beyond the defense line. Gerla's fingers slid silently to her sword hilt. Ral's eyes locked onto one spot. "You felt it too," Gerla said. Ral stared into the shadows for a long time, then pulled his gaze back. "Probably just a small rat. Let the wounded rest first. We take turns on night watch." He walked a few steps toward the line, stopped among the corpses and looked back at those shadows one more time. Deep In those shadows, a snake person commander named 8 was silently withdrawing into the darkness. His scales matched the bark perfectly, breathing suppressed to near zero, heartbeat slowed beyond human detection. One of Emma's 6 commanders above level 10, he'd personally crept to the core of the gnoll defense line to observe everything. He'd seen it all. The mutated gnolls' regeneration, they'll tearing apart a forest elephant bare-handed, the half-elves controlling plants. Every detail recorded in his memory, ready to carry back to his master in the deep forest. Once he reached a safe distance with no pursuit, he slithered through the fallen leaves without a sound, racing toward the forest's steepest core. Neither Ral nor Jirai knew an older green dragon had hidden in those depths for years. He had quietly built his power and sent scouts to trace my leaking energy. They didn't know the snake people were watching. They only knew that tonight, despite the temporary quiet, sleep wouldn't come easy. The snake person commander 8 made it back to the forest core by dawn. He went straight to Emma's tent and reported everything he'd seen at our western defense line. Gnolls with ogre-level healing, half-elves controlling plants and creating tree soldiers, 2 races fighting side by side with military precision, layered defense strategies against different threat levels. This was no ragtag monster mob, it resembled a trained, civilized army. Emma's tail tightened as she listened. She'd led the snake people for years, fought ogres, competed with beasts for territory, watched forest powers rise and fall, but she'd never heard of gnolls and half-elves cooperating. Even gnolls regenerating like ogres were completely unheard of. Combined with the mysterious power only her dragon master could sense drifting from the west, the pieces fit together. She brought 8 to the dragon's lair, the hollow ancient tree. He'd never been inside before. All the years since the snake people became vassals, only Emma had permission to enter. Emma held up a small green scale, given to her by ethers during her dragon blood conversion years ago, and the magical barrier parted to let them through. Inside was more than a tree hollow. Dragon tongue runes covered every surface, thin streams of green magic flowing between them. The skull of the level 16 ogre warlord floated, slowly rotating, sending magic pulses through the rune network with each turn. Crude but functional magic fortress, able to block attacks below master rank, shield against external detection, and prevent anything without a dragon blood mark from entering. This was why no beast or rival power had ever found the core area. Ethers hadn't just been cautious, he'd built himself a citadel. Ethers lay coiled on his gold pile in the deepest part of the lair, 12M of dark green dragon. His eyes opened and fixed on the trembling snake commander behind Emma. Who did you bring in, Nelt? This is Commander 8. He just returned from the outer edge with intelligence that matches what you described. I believe you should hear it directly. Ethers studied 8 from head to tail. Speak. 8 couldn't move, his tail curled involuntarily, heart hammering. He'd glimpsed Ethers from a distance years ago. Being pinned by those eyes at close range was completely different. Emma touched his tail tip gently with hers. Encouragement. He took a breath and started talking. Once the first sentence came out, the rest poured out. Every detail, no additions, no embellishments. Mutated gnolls healing speed, the half-elves plant magic, the coordinated tactics, the defense line structure. He wasn't there to analyze. Analysis was the dragon's job. Silence filled the lair for a long time after he finished. Ether slowly stood up from his gold pile. His 12-meter dragon body unfolded inside the confined space. His wings half opened, then closed. His pupils burned with raw greed. Gnolls had gained ogre-level regeneration, half-elves controlled plants, and an unprecedented coalition had appeared beside that mysterious power source. He stared down at 8. When those gnolls healed quickly, was there anything else? 8 blinked. Yes. Every time they regenerated, they were muttering something under their breath. Ether's tail slammed the ground. Gold coins scattered everywhere. The greed in his eyes nearly erupted. His body dropped low, wings half spread, ready to launch from the lair. The deep dragon growl shook the rune-covered walls, making every symbol flash at once. 8 flinched backward. Even Emma's fingers tightened involuntarily. Then the impulse was crushed. Years of survival discipline forced it down. Wings folded back, he coiled onto his gold again. The greed didn't disappear, but of caution held it in check. He was a green dragon who'd hidden in the wilderness for years without being discovered or hunted. If that power was what he thought it was, rushing in would be the stupidest possible move. He'd waited this long. A few more days wouldn't matter. He turned to Emma, voice calm again. Pull back every scout. Then mobilize the army. Push the mid-forest medium tribes westward. Don't tell them why. Just let them know there's something in the west worth fighting for. Let them charge in on their own. His tail pointed toward the outer edge. Let them test that tribe's strength for us. Whether they get wiped out or break through, either result tells us how deep the other side's hand goes. Emma bowed. Understood. I'll arrange it immediately. The barrier sealed behind them, locking Ethers and his burning eyes back inside layers of runes and gold. The mid-forest tribes had no idea their fates had just been written onto a chessboard by something far stronger than any of them. They were about to become expendable probes, thrown at my tribe to measure what we could handle. And at the other end of that chessboard, Ral was crouching at the base of a corpse pile, sharpening his claws, completely unaware of the trouble heading his way. Emma moved fast after leaving the dragon lair. She gathered all 6 snake commanders, repeated Ether's orders exactly, and within half an hour 3,000 snake warriors were formed up and marching into the mid-forest. Next, their mission: drive the mid-layer tribes westward, straight toward my territory. Use them as disposable probes to test my tribe's strength. The first target was the Bloodaxe tribe. Their leader Hort was a level 11 gnoll warlord with over 1,000 fighters. He'd been comfortable in his territory for years, paying tribute to the snake people and keeping his head down. He was examining a captured iron axe when the alarm went up. He ran to the fence and froze. He'd seen snake person hunting parties before, a dozen, maybe a few dozen. This was an army. 3,000 snake warriors in tight formation, spear tips gleaming. 6 commanders lined up at the front. Emma sat on a raised platform carried by 4 soldiers, poison spear in hand. She didn't even look at him. Hort tried to negotiate. We've stayed on our land, paid every tribute on time, never crossed into your territory. If you want more tribute, we can talk. Emma's answer was simple: leave, go west. I don't want to see your campfires by nightfall. When Hort opened his mouth to object, Emma flicked a glance at 2 of her commanders. They hit him simultaneously, 1 strike each to the chest. He flew backward through his own fence and crashed into a rock pile. 2 level 10 commanders against an unprepared level 11 gnoll. No contest, you don't get to negotiate with me. Leave by dark or next time I won't just kick you out. Hort's bat blood, who lowered his head and squeezed out one word: retreat. His people scrambled into their caves, grabbed everything they could carry, and headed west. Hort walked at the back, didn't look behind him once. The second target was the gray-skinned goblin tribe. Over 3,000 goblins, met twice the Bloodaxe numbers, but far weaker fighters. Their chief was a skinny level 10 goblin with a staff taller than himself. He took one look at the snake army and ran out to kneel on the roadside screaming, "We'll go. We'll leave on our own. No need for trouble." Then he shrieked at his goblins to run. 3,000 goblins poured westward in total chaos. The last was Deep Forge, a dwarven settlement of 800 built around an abandoned ancient dwarf mine. Their chief was a level 12 warrior with a gray-white beard and a cracked ruby in his helmet. They'd been mining and forging weapons here for decades. 2 dwarves my tribe had taken in years ago, the ones who'd brought us from Stone Age to Iron Age, had escaped from this very mine before being enslaved and sold to the Gia Principality. The dwarf chief stood on his stone wall watching the snake army approach. He said nothing for a long time. He'd done business with snake people before, traded dwarf forged spears for their potions. Now those same snake people stood outside his walls with 3,000 soldiers. He knew this day would come. From the moment Ethers killed the ogre warlord and the people took over the core zone, the dwarves' days in this forest were numbered. He turned to his people: pack up. The forge is too heavy, leave it. Take the anvil, tools, weapons, and food. The dwarves didn't panic like goblins or rage like gnolls. They packed silently and efficiently. The tools on carts, weapons on backs, or in furnace left behind. The chief was the last to leave. He looked back at the mine they'd worked for decades, then turned west without another word. 3 mid-forest tribes driven from their homes in under 3 days, all heading the same direction, west. They had nowhere else to go. North was the human principality. South was the dwarf kingdom. East led toward elven territory. West was the only road open, and west was exactly where my tribe's defense line stood. The Bloodaxe gnolls led the march, Hort swallowing his fury. The gray-skinned goblins scattered across the middle, their chief counting heads while running. The deep-forged dwarves brought up the rear, heavy steps, some cursing about settling old and new debts, most just silent. 3 tribes that used to fight each other over scraps were now on the same road, pushed by the same force, heading toward the same destination. Behind them, 3,000 snake warriors reformed their lines. Emma stood at the front, looking west through the canopy. She didn't need to follow or monitor them. She knew they'd go west. They had no choice. And at the western defense line, Ral was crouching by a campfire, flipping a slab of boar ribs over the flames. He had no idea that 3 separate forces, each bigger and more organized than anything he'd faced so far, were being herded straight toward him. Grease dripped onto the fire and popped. He thought the wind felt a bit stronger than usual tonight. He didn't think much of it.